their role.
Sveiki visi. Visų pirma, sveikinu su tarptautinė žmogaus teisų diena. Aš manau, kad ši diena yra atsakomybė, taip pat ir įsipareigojimas ir galimybės švęsti ir pagalvoti apie tuos, kurie aukoja savo gyvenimus ir gyvybės ir kovoja už laisvę. Ar tai būtų čia? Ar tai būtų kaiminystėje? Ar visame pasaulyje? Šiandieninė mūsų istorija yra Baltarusija, tai yra Baltarusijos laisvės moteris. Tai, kas įvyko praeitais metais ir kas tęsiasi iki šiol, tai buvo labai netikėtas dalykas ir tai buvo didžiulis sprogimas. Tai yra troškimų sprogimas, pokyčių siekimų sprogimas. Ir Baltarusijos moteris suprato, kad jos mato savo šalį šiek tiek kitaip, nei ją mato režimo vadovybė. Ir įvairios pilietinės akcijos, įvairios iniciatyvos, rinkimų procesas, COVID-19 pandemija, socialinė žiniasklaida prisidėjo prie šio didžiulio protesto, pokyčių vardan ir šio masinio protesto prieš smurtą, valstybinį smurtą. Ir jis tęsiasi iki šiol. Lietuvos visuomenė taip pat labai aktyviai sureagavo, ją įkvėpė tai, kas vyksta Baltarusijoje.
And also showed massive solidarity, forming a human chain from Vilnius to the Belarusian border, crowdfunding, donating a lot of money. Lithuanian government initiated the humanitarian corridor, issued multiple national visas for those who are under risk and repressions so that people could safely come to Lithuania. I think that it is a huge investment for the future, but we do know very little about the neighboring country as well. And I think this is a good opportunity and momentum to speak about the Belarusian women, to hear firsthand of the personal stories, the motivation, the expectations for the future, and also the stories of their friends, their beloved ones, to better understand what is the Belarusian society and the Belarusian women going through the last year and a half. So without further ado, we have a wonderful panel of Victoria Palchis, Hana Libokova, and Marina Mentusova. And also I know that we have a video address by the Canadian ambassador. So let us hear Canadian ambassador first.
Dear Vitas, it is great to be with you again, even if it's only virtual. Dear panelists, chers amis, chers collègues, thank you for being here today to hear about the stories of women actively engaged in building a new and better Belarus. Canada has consistently advocated for and supported gender equality, promoted the empowerment of women and girls, called for the protection of their human rights, and fought sexual and gender-based violence, including in conflict settings. Women peace builders have a long history of active participation in preventing and resolving conflict. Yet they continue to be sidelined in formal peace processes. They are rarely represented in peace and security decision-making. They lack funding for their work, and they are often targeted by threats and violence. We are here today to recognize the importance of women peace builders and their contributions to international peace and security. Yes, they are mothers, wives, daughters, friends, colleagues, but more importantly, they are community leaders, mediators, negotiators, journalists, civil society activists, bloggers, human rights defenders. indigenous and youth leaders. They are remarkable women working to prevent conflict and build peace. Women have the right to full and equal participation in decision-making, including on matters of peace and security. And this has been true for Belarus. The Canadian government has supported Belarusian organizations seeking to improve the lives of women, from groups who provide practical support to women victims of domestic violence, to advocating for change to Belarusian laws and policies on domestic violence, to advocating for women's equal participation in social and economic life. For obvious reasons, I am not able to name them here, but know that they have done vital work to improve the lives of women in Belarus. This is but one way in which we act locally to incorporate Canada's feminist foreign policy in our work in Belarus. Conflict affects women, girls, men, and boys in different ways. Canada believes that it is important that these consequences are recognized and addressed as urged by the United Nations Security Council in the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. Women, women's organizations and networks play important roles in advocating for peace, mobilizing peace movements, and in preserving communities, including ensuring safety for women in their societies. These women leaders are courageous because this work often comes at great risk, and honestly, what could be more true than what we have seen for Belarusian women who are fighting for democracy in their country. Peace builders across the world face threats and attack against themselves and their families from those who have vested interests in the conflict and in the status quo. That said, women, peace and security is not about the idea that women are inherently more peaceful than men. Instead, it is that the best policies result when the people affected by them have a voice in their creation. It is through the inclusion of women, not just as recipients of aid or protection, but in decision-making at all levels, that societies can achieve true human security. Where women are included, peace is more enduring. Where women are included in the economy, economic growth is greater. Where women are included in governance, states are more stable. Where women in all of their diversity are included in our collective security, everybody is safer. Including women and girls matters because no society can possibly reach its full potential when half of its population is held back. And as our ambassador for Women, Peace and Security noted when she addressed the Security Council, women do not need to be given a voice. They have voices. We need to listen to them. I am so glad that we have the opportunity to listen today. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Ambassador. I hope you are watching us online. And I think that your address was a good segue to our panel, that not only like that women need to have a voice, they have a voice, and this is an opportunity for us to listen and to see the story of Belarus and the recent years through their eyes, through their lenses. So let me start with Hana, and the first question, which would be similar to everyone. Tell me a little bit, and the audience, a little bit about you, what you are, what you were before the summer 2020, and after that, how did this summer change your personal life? So Hana, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to the organizers for this event. Thank you, Vitis, for moderation. And obviously thank you to the ambassador for wonderful words. So my name is Hana Libokova. I'm a journalist. And I was a journalist and I still am. So I used to live in exile. I used to work at Belsat TV, which is this TV station that is based in Warsaw. And at some point, I remember that I came back to Belarus before May, before spring. And I was sort of thinking of coming back to Warsaw and work from there, but then the whole revolution started, so I decided to stay. And basically, I covered the protest in Belarus throughout the elections. And I saw this kind of politicization of people really surprised me. I was really shocked to see that the whole society evolved so much and the whole society stood up and rose up against the dictatorship. And basically, yeah, I had to flee after the elections because of repressions. So I came to Vilnius and I continued working as a journalist, as an analyst. And my main goal is to inform the public, the audience, I would say, about the situation in Belarus, about repressions, but also about our fight that still continues.
Thank you. Thank you, Hana. We'll go deeper into all the stories and what is happening in Belarus. But the ambassador was mentioning policies, what should be done in terms of like policies. I think it's very important to hear like personal stories and accounts. And though you mentioned that as if nothing changed in terms of your personal profession and life, that you used to be a journalist and you continue to be, but the societal change was something which dramatically changed the entire environment and also the topics that perhaps you are covering, right, and what you used to cover. So let me turn to Marina, because I know that she was directly involved into like some civic activities, but how this period of 2020, the summer, changed your life, if at all? Please, Marina.
Until August 2020, I did some project for gender equality. So when Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya became one of the candidates, it was already a great victory for all feminists in Belarus. Of course, we have some women in politics, of course, but they never made important decision and did not attract so much attention. And for me, it's a very important moment because I have a little daughter. When the protest began, she was 6 months, yes, 6 months old, and I decided that I wanted a different country for her and a different world for her.
So it's not only what relates to your profession, but I also believe that many people in Belarus like felt that it's a responsibility of theirs talking about the future of Belarus, and like as a mother, and we need to stress perhaps that it doesn't really matter about the roles, but that was a desire for change on many aspects, and it doesn't matter whether you were from Minsk, the capital, or the region, the small city. It doesn't matter whether you are young or old, whether you are a student or a pensioner, whether you are a daughter, a mother, grandmother. Really, we have many accounts from like the famous Baginskaya, right? Who was protesting all the time for decades, basically, to very young students and even like teenagers who were demanding that change. But Victoria, let me turn to you now. Like, where were you before the summer of 2020, and what changed?
Ну, весной 2020 года мы с моим мужем занимались блогерской деятельностью и общественной деятельностью. И лето 2020 года, конечно, в корне поменяло нашу жизнь, потому что сейчас мой муж политически заключенный, его судят в Минске, и ему грозит до 20 лет лишения свободы. А я была вынуждена эмигрировать в Литву, о чем совершенно не было в планах. Это решение было принято буквально за одну ночь, и здесь, в Литве, я родила нашу дочь, и жизнь, конечно, поменялась кардинально. Теперь я жена политзаключенного и женщина, воспитывающая ребенка одна.
My life, I will translate what Victoria said, because I know that there's no interpretation from Russian. So Victoria's life changed dramatically. Before the summer 2020, she and her husband were bloggers, were active in the social networks, writing about what's important, about the Belarusian culture, history, and things like that. But after the summer, Victoria's husband was detained, arrested, and he's facing charges of 20 years imprisonment. And therefore, Victoria had to flee very fastly and she came to Lithuania and gave birth to their daughter in December. So now she is more in a mother of a role, while the husband and the father of their daughter is in jail with a potential sentence of 20 years. So the 2020 summer changed her life dramatically. Thank you for that. And I think that there are this is one, but not the only dramatic story. This intersection of imprisonment, people, I think that all of the ladies here, they have their friends, their colleagues, acquaintances from the neighborhood who are currently in jail. There are hundreds of people who are recognized as political prisoners, tens of thousands of people, more than 100,000 people who were forced to flee. We know accounts and testimonies of people, of women who were threatened as mothers that their kids might be taken away. And that's horrifying. I mean, that it's happening in Europe in the 21st century. But tell us more about the context of Belarus. Marina mentioned already the Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya's name, and the revolution in Belarus is called the revolution with the women face. And we know that there were protests of pensioners, there were protests of students, striking committees, people from factories, and yet there must be more, not only the women trio, why this revolution, these protests are called revolution with the women's face. Hana, what's your take on that?
Well, I think it's called because of the significant role that women played. If you look at this group here, blogger, the wife of a blogger, journalist, activist, we are basically representing at least part of the society that finally, right, said a no to Lukashenko. And basically, if we look at the number of political prisoners, if we look at sociological, gender, professional groups that these political prisoners belong to, we can clearly see that this is the whole society. This is every group that belongs to the society, right, that stood up against Lukashenko. So women became this, significant sort of face of this protest for several reasons. Firstly, as we mentioned, Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya. So she became she got registered as a presidential candidate because those top-profile, high-profile male candidates were barred from running, and she decided to run instead of her husband, Sergei Tikhanovsky. I assume that everybody here knows this story, but this is a brilliant story, I think, and she took this responsibility. She showed that she's able to do this, and people believed in this because she did it because of love, because she wanted to support her husband, she wanted to sort of continue the work he was doing, right? And this strength, this amazing, empathy really kind of drew sort of a lot of people and many, she basically galvanized the public. And then there was this amazing image of three women, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, Veronika Tsepkala, Maria Kalesnikava, who you remember had this amazing sort of symbols, clenched fist, victory sign, and heart shape. like each of them had each. And people were so motivated by this. These women were a total contrast to what Lukashenko is. They were empathetic, they were kind, they listened to people, and finally the society felt that indeed, I mean, there are some leaders who listened to them, and because these women said that they did not have any political ambitions, they only wanted to bring the country to new free and fair elections, the whole society believed them, right? And they supported them. And another really important take from the last year and kind of the significance and the role of women in the revolution was that they basically changed the dynamic of the protests. I remember the 9th of August, the 10th of August, the 11th of August, total violence on the streets. We did not have internet. It was absolutely, it was like a war. It was like an open conflict in Minsk with streets, you know, blocked and police shooting at people. And on the 12th of August, and I'm sure Marina will talk more about that, on the 12th of August, women came out to the streets all in white with flowers. And it was shocking. Like, people again saw how powerful women are. And from that moment, even police felt embarrassed because they were like, whoa, how should we attack these people? They had nothing. Like, they did not have any guns, or they did not intend to, whatever, fight or something. So they felt so embarrassed that they did not attack women at first. And then the whole society felt motivated. They saw the example of these strong women on the streets, despite violence and everything. And then we saw all these, massive demonstrations, because people just kind of took the example of these women. And to perhaps finish this part, I would say that Lukashenko is sort of one of these founding fathers of Belarusian democracy, because he has done more than anybody else to promote democracy in Belarus. And obviously I'm joking when I say that he is a founding father, because this is kind of a negative example. He really vaccinated people against authoritarianism, against dictatorship, and people now want democracy. But I think the same thing he also did to feminism, to advance the cause of feminism in Belarus. This is so interesting. Like, I talked to people when Lukashenko said that a woman cannot lead the country. He said that, like, it's just too heavy for her, it's just too hard. And the Constitution is not designed. Yeah, the Constitution is not designed for a woman. And I talked to women, I traveled across the country, and they were saying that, oh, you know what? I mean, how come I can lead the country? Like, I can lead the country better than he does. So he even kind of sort of promoted feminism even here, right? Even by saying this. So yeah, I think Lukashenko is the biggest promoter of feminism in Belarus.
Very interesting, such a promoting through denial, right? Which unleashes some energy, if not anger. And I think that this contrast of the guy with the mustache leading or stagnating the country for 25 years, who's saying that there is no alternative, and now what happened in 2020, and this is a common narrative for any regime country, that there is no alternative to the dictator, right? And then what Svetlana Tikhanovskaya showed, though she didn't have that ambition, right? But she showed well, there are 9 million alternatives to you, millions of alternatives, and more than a half of them, the alternatives, as the ambassador said, is women, the women population. So even if you are denying that, but no, women can lead the country. And I think that was a boost of inspiration, and the follow-up events as well, not only for Belarusian women, but I think for the women in the region. This constant neglection, saying that you sit down there, you do not speak up, and this resilience, if you will, I think was a dramatic change, and very rapid one. So, Marina, I know that you were at the roots of this movement, Women in White, and I think that's perhaps one of the reasons why the protests are called, the revolution is called revolution with the woman's face, right? Promoting also another very contrasting thing. The regime is acting with violence, and women are standing up with a very fear and sometimes even biggest strength requiring method, which is called nonviolence. So, Marina, why, Women Trio, the Women in White, is there anything else what you can add to this, why the protests, the revolution with the women's face?
Thank you for the question. When in August 2020, we all saw how basic human rights in being violated in Belarus, we could not remain silent. In response to the aggression, beating of civilians, we first came out with flowers, with white dresses, with peace, and the intention to end of the violence. So we started to do women's solidarity action in every city in Belarus, every small city and every big city. This helped take the protest movement to a whole new level. So the whole country came out to protest. Women have, women have become the driving force behind protest in Belarus. But now we paid for that. For them. To date, almost 500 non-profit organizations have been liquidated in Belarus, including almost all organizations that help victims of domestic violence. Yes, the revolution of Belarus has a woman's face, but maybe that's why we pay harder.
Indeed, I think that it also is a reminder that freedom doesn't come for free. And perhaps it's the women who understand that, because beyond the repressions, there's the human face, the personal story, the relatives, sons and daughters. And I think that this prize sometimes is felt by the women much more personally. And this drama, this concern is much deeper. Victoria, why revolution with the women's face? I think that there were many men, in fact, as well. But your take, nonviolence, the contrast to the dictator. Anything else that you think might be added to this? Why the revolution with the women's face?
Мне кажется, что наше общество не было готово к той агрессии и той жесткости, которая вылилась на улицы 9-12 августа 2020 года. И то, что мы видели своими глазами, мы называли в Минске «война». И это оказалось всего лишь 1/10 частью того насилия, той просто непонятной звериной жестокости, которая творилась после задержания в изоляторах и в Окрестино. И общество было не готово к всему этому, и возник вопрос, что мы можем этому противопоставить. И я помню, 12 августа женщины впервые вышли на Комаровку в белых одеждах и с цветами в руках. И этот призыв звучал так, что наших мужчин избили, а мы выйдем и заявим наш мирный протест. Мы покажем, что мы не согласны с этим, что мы выйдем за наших мужчин, которых пытали в изоляторах. И я считаю, что этот выход 12 августа предопределил дальнейший вектор революции именно как мирной революции, что мы не будем противоставлять диктатору такие же жесткие меры, такое же насилие. Мы не будем его демонстрировать, мы продемонстрируем законность, мирность и любовь. И мне кажется, что именно поэтому белорусскую революцию называют революцией с женским лицом, что мы как общество остались в рамках закона, что мы как общество показали себя более благородными, мы показали контраст между тем, кем являются белорусы, и тем, кто оказался во власти в нашей стране.
So what Victoria is adding, and I think that relates like totally in what was said by Hana and Marina, that the society was not ready for such massive protests and then the massive terror and violence. What the regime was trying to do in the aftermath of the elections is to respond with huge violence and terror and to provoke also violence from the side of the population. And the very first days actually looked very terrifying, like almost a war. And the role of the women was that they came out very peacefully saying that our men are beaten, they are in jail, and we are standing up demanding like the peaceful solution of the situation, and they were responding to violence with the promotion of peace, love, and a call for justice and for abiding to the laws, even if they understood that it's a regime country. So it's, again, another account why this protest, non-violent and peaceful protest, got the name of the revolution with the women's face. And I think that's not really a surprise why there are so many, multiple actually, awards for the women trio and for women, actually, for the Belarusian women in generally. I think we can count dozens of the international awards, even the Sakharov Prize last year, but there are many more in Denmark, in Germany, in United States, all across the globe. That was an inspiration. And if we talk about the inspiration, throughout the last few years, since the summer of the 2020, who is the most inspiring person for you, Marina?
There are now many political prisoners in Belarus. You know that. Including Olga Gorbanova, the head of the organization to help women survivors of violence. Violence against those who fight violence every day is unfair and inhuman. So Olga's power inspires me to work harder every day while I have this privilege.
And if I recall, Olga was detained not that a long time ago, right? It's just
1 month.
Yeah, which again is a proof. I think that needs to be stressed over and over again, that the protests and the violence didn't stop in 2020, that repressions do continue. The regime is chasing down activists, human rights defenders, journalists, despite their sex, despite their age, despite their occupation, region, or whatever. And the repressions, unfortunately, do continue. And partly, I think, whoever who is still operating inside Belarus, trying to protect human rights, trying to stand up for the political prisoners, deserves a huge admiration. But what about you, Hana? Who's your inspiration nowadays?
I definitely would agree with Marina when it comes to political prisoners. Well, these are heroes. These are people who are in jail and who suffer every day because, well, conditions in prisons are inhumane. People are being literally tortured. They don't have access to medical assistance. They don't have fresh air. They're being beaten and deprived, basically, of their basic rights, not only of freedom in prison. And I would mention here definitely all female journalists, political prisoners in Belarus right now. This is to mention Marina Zolotova, editor-in-chief of Tut.by, who is now in jail. This is to mention a reporter, Lena Tolkacheva, or Katya Andreeva, who is my friend, a reporter from Belsat, who was arrested last year in November, only because she covered a protest, a kind of commemorating rally that in memory of this protester Roman Bondarenko, who died when thousands of people came out to the streets, and she was broadcasting from a window of an apartment, and she was accused of organizing a protest. And I'm just wondering, how is it possible to organize a protest by just broadcasting what is happening right now, right? So we have a lot of cameras.
That camera guy might get arrested in Belarus for just taking the video of this particular discussion. That's how horrifying and absurd that is, right?
Exactly. And if I can mention another name, which I think we should be all shouting right now, this is Ksenia Lutskina. She's also a journalist. She used to work at state-owned television, but after August, she joined the strike. She joined the protests. She worked as a documentary filmmaker, so she was not involved in propaganda. She was doing some different sort of journalism, right? Documentary films and everything. So she joined the protests. She said that she wanted to launch a TV station, an alternative independent TV station. Then she was arrested. She was never released. She's a political prisoner, and she has a brain tumor. And it's constantly growing, so her health really deteriorated, and she basically has to take painkillers every day to sort of stay sane. And yeah, she must be released immediately, as well as more than 900 other political prisoners who are currently in jail in Belarus.
Victoria, who's your inspiration?
Я хочу сказать, что в целом мы за этот год увидели много удивительных и вдохновляющих примеров среди нашей нации. И мне кажется, что многие из белорусов продемонстрировали то, чего не ожидали ни мы от них, ни они сами от себя. Даже Светлана Тихановская, которая возглавила белорусский протест и стала полноправным, полноценным лидером белорусской нации. Та же Мария Kalesnikava, которая разорвала свой паспорт и выбрала заключение на много лет, выбрала это перед эмиграцией. Та же Наталья Херше, которая является белорусской со швейцарским гражданством, и ей много раз предлагали написать прошение о помиловании для того, чтобы отпустить ее. Но она каждый раз отказывалась, и ей ужесточили условия содержания. Это и Ксюша Сыромолот, это студентка, которую осудили, и она отбывает срок в колонии. И журналистки Дарья Жильцова и Екатерина Андреева. Мне кажется, что любой человек из вышеперечисленных и в целом из политических заключенных могли бы написать прошение о помиловании, признать свою вину, выступить по телевидению, признать Лукашенко президентом и выйти на свободу. Но никто из этих людей этого не сделал. И это очень вдохновляющие примеры.
Victoria mentioned that there are many examples which were totally unexpected 2 years ago. You couldn't expect that, but starting from Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, who became the symbol of the process, but then also the obvious person who won the elections and who represents now the democratic Belarus, the very same, her colleague from the women trio, Maria Kalesnikava, who torn her passport to not be forced out to leave the country, as well as Ms. Hershe, who has the Swiss citizenship and could plead for pardon and go back to Switzerland, but she did not do that. The way also the student leader Tsimaralot or journalist Chultsova, Andreeva, all of them might actually ask for pardon today and most probably get released tomorrow, but they are not doing it because they are super brave and they are heroes of today. So you mentioned many political prisoners who are heroes, who are inspiring for their courage. But could you please share, perhaps, if that's possible, some personal stories on the political prisoners that you personally know, or that you think that their case is standing out? Because I've heard horrifying stories when people are getting COVID in jail, and then the authorities, the regime is trying to put them into other cameras to infect other detainees, and other multiple accounts of torture, no access to water, medicine, people treated in inhumane conditions, detained in inhumane conditions. Hana, just because I think that despite the fact that it's very unpleasant to hear, that needs to be said out loud so that we understand the gravity of the situation.
I would definitely say that we should pay more attention to the stories of political prisoners. It's really, we kind of mentioned the number, we mentioned the figure, more than 900 at the moment. There are thousands more who have been jailed for politically motivated reasons. But we do not focus on their stories in particular. And this is a source of stories full of dignity, full of courage, full of resilience. And these are people who can give us an example. When I was thinking about who I might mention when you ask this question, we all sort of know about Maria Kalesnikava, about many other brave women, but I would like to mention those people who are known less, let's say, who are kind of less visible. Well, her name is Maria Nyesterova. We met on the 9th of August when I went to my school to vote, and she was an independent observer. And she attended the same school 40 years ago. And I attended this school some 20 or 15 years ago. So we never met before, but she lived just kind of, her block of apartments was just kind of next one from mine. We talked. She was never allowed inside the polling station. She was outside, but she asked me to go and take some pictures of these ballots, of the voting ballots, so that she could prove that the voting is being violated. So I quoted her in one of my articles as well, and I did remember her name. And then all of a sudden, at some point, I saw her name among the list of political prisoners. And that was such a shock because, well, she is an ordinary citizen, I would say. She was never involved in politics. She worked at the border, basically, at state border committee. So for all her life, she was a public servant, a civil servant. And something changed, apparently, right? Which I never had a chance to figure because I never had a chance to talk to her. But she joined the protest. She, after that, protested. She was finally accused of organizing, I think, the protest movement in Belarus, one of the organizers, and she was sentenced to 3 years in prison. When she was detained, she was badly beaten. And again, this happened in my neighborhood. This is just my neighbor. This neighbor who is, an ordinary citizen who was making history, piece by piece and changing the country. And perhaps another story, just briefly, what really shocked me most recently is this story of a mother of an activist who fled the country in fear of repressions. And last month, security forces broke into her apartment with guns. And she was so scared, like they finally published the video of her, and she was literally sitting on a bed, and they were pointing guns at her just because she's a mother of an activist. And now, like first she was detained for 10 days, and now she's a suspect in a criminal case. So she became a political prisoner as well. And she is, you know, some 60-year-old woman who, again, who was never perhaps interested in politics before, but then 2020 changed everything. And people are being badly kind of punished for this, you know, punished for their willingness to have democracy and fight for it peacefully. And there are, again, many of such stories of ordinary people in Belarus right now.
I think that one transformation which was mentioned in Belarus very oftenly, that what changed in summer 2020, that we finally saw each other, neighbor saw a neighbor, right? That previously, if that was a rather atomized society, suddenly people noticed each other, that they have neighbors, that these neighbors have an opinion and also have the same feeling for change. And I think that's very important what you are, Hana, mentioning, that it's really not about politicians. It's not about super professionals or super intellectuals or whatever. It's about everyone, including the very ordinary people. And these ordinary people, even if we call them, they are in fact extraordinary, because their courage, their bravery, their commitment to this change is something spectacular. But I bet that every one of you has a story to share. So Marina, your story.
Today, my colleague and friend, Nyesterova, should speak here. She usually speaks for the two of us and sits without some notes, actually. 2 days ago, Nastya's grandfather died, and it turned out that there was no one to bury him in Belarus. Nastya's dad is dying of the cancer. Nastya's mother, Valeria Kostugova, is in prison for her interviews, and I think is possibly responsible for our women's protests with Nastya. So we cannot return in Belarus not only to joy and work and come some friend. We cannot say goodbye for the last time to our loved ones.
Yeah, I mean, the word upset is not the right one, to be honest. When I heard this story, and again, it's not the only story, right? When people cannot bury their relatives, go to the funeral of their beloved ones just because they were forced out to leave. And on Nastya's example is just that her mother, a famous political scientist whom I also personally know, and just like she is in jail just because she's a political scientist, right? It's really another testimony and example of this unprecedented terror and the fact of the brutal regime, and that they have no principles whatsoever and nothing is out of bounds for them. Victoria.
Вообще, с начала белорусской революции мы все время шутили, что невозможно пробить новое дно. Но власти нам показывали, что доньев мало не бывает, и по дну можно пробивать каждый день. Поэтому я вспомню только недавние случаи, которые происходят вот буквально сегодня, вчера, позавчера. Силовики с оружием и в амуниции стали приходить к людям, которые были наблюдателями на выборах в 2020 году. Говорят о том, что вы проходите свидетелем по уголовному делу, и поэтому мы у вас проведем обыск. Хотя непонятно, какими актами и руководствуются, проводя обыск у свидетеля. Квартиру просто переворачивают вверх дном, не составляя даже протокола. И вот буквально позавчера моего знакомого Дмитрия Федорука забрали на 15 суток якобы за неповиновение. К нему вот таким вот образом ворвались силовики, перевернули вверх дном его квартиру, ударили его по голове и забрали его на 15 суток, якобы он проявил неповиновение. И такие истории показывают, что просто власти уже даже не пытаются прикрываться законностью. К любому человеку могут войти вообще без, не предоставляя никаких документов, не составляя никаких актов, и просто забрать в изолятор.
A year ago we were joking, that was a sad joke, but we were joking like how low this regime can go, like, and with each single day with a new story showing up, we were saying that it can go as low as possible, like lower every day. And to just understand and explain the gravity of the situation is that the security forces can come to your apartment like without any warrant, without any rules, procedures. And an example of my friend Fedoruk was that his apartment was raided and he was detained just for the alleged non-compliance. So a person in Belarus cannot feel secure just because the police or even the people without any insignias can come to you, detain or hijack. And this is like really what should be called a state of terror. So we went through the examples of the political prisoners, but there's also another like sad story of people being forced to leave. And some, as Maria Kalesnikava, whom you mentioned, refused to leave and got into jail because of that. But there are thousands, 10,000s of stories of people who were forced to leave. All of you are examples of that yourselves. As mothers, as media professionals, with kids, with husbands, with it really depends. With cats and dogs, actually, like there were evacuations also with pets as well, and maybe you can also share what are you going through being in exile, or what you can tell about the other examples. How can we help here in Lithuania or in Poland or in Ukraine? How others are helping, Marina?
It's difficult to explain what forced migration is. You know, imagine that you have a place of power, and one day it is taken away from you. Help foundation, like by help or by soul, to help Belarusians.
Yeah, I remember when in Lithuania in August 2020, there was an initiative called Go Belarus, which crowdfunded more than 200,000 euros, which were transferred eventually to Buy Help, if I'm not mistaken, and not the Solidarity Foundation, helping those who were beaten. But in fact, yes, every Lithuanian, non-Lithuanian, like every person who is in solidarity with the democratic and free Belarus could donate 5 euros, 10 euros, really doesn't matter, like to the Solidarity Foundations, and there are a few of them. As well, I think that we mentioned political prisoners, so if I can add, Christmas time is coming, like New Year's. There's a website, Vesna, the human rights organization Vesna. You can pick whomever, like from the list of more than 900 political prisoners, and try to write a postcard. say that I looked into your case and I wanted to write you a few warm words. Yeah, how are you feeling, Hana, here in exile? And how can, I don't know, Lithuanians or people, international society help you or people who have a similar destiny of yours?
Well, first of all, I think it's really important to mention that Lithuania has done for Belarusians more than perhaps any other country in Europe or in the world. The position of Lithuania is really strong, is really like based on values, and it's an example for other countries as well. And I understand that there were some, especially recently, issues with US sanctions and with the announcement of two ministers of their readiness to step down because of this transit of potash. But I would say that firstly, this is not sort of their fault. This is, there are companies who still buy potash from Belarus. Instead, I would say that this kind of policy of how to implement sanctions and how to sort of work with them, how to prevent sanctions avoidance should continue. So we do not need resignations, we need actually kind of continuation and digging deeper into this sanctions policy and how to implement the sanctions. So when it comes to what we need as sort of refugees or those people who left Belarus, those people who are in forced exile, I think there are many issues, right? Starting from legalization and having a status in a country, having in the first place a visa, how we are kind of able to flee in the first place, and then getting a residence permit here, which is not that easy. Then when it comes to registration of our companies, for example, this is also not that easy because even opening up a bank account is not easy because of this anti-money laundering issues and everything. Just imagine even this is really kind of difficult. So Lithuania is helping here a lot, but it's really important that other countries do the same. And when it comes to victims of violence, of repression, those who flee the country, they very often need psychological support. And there is a program here that helps such people. People can have a therapist, can have this sort of aids, this support. And let's just remember that many of them are really traumatized and many of them really need this kind of assistance. So again, there are so many issues how we can help. And I think Lithuania here is an example, and Vitis, you actually might mention even more here if you take the voice and you can mention the programs that you're working on.
Thank you. Well, no doubt in terms of policies, I do agree with the fact that Lithuania stands out, and I mean, I can only praise the strong political will, despite the fact that the government was changing. Nothing changed in terms of the support to the Belarusian society and those who are fleeing from the repressions. Victoria, you are also one of the dramatic examples, I think, because your husband is in jail. You gave birth to a daughter here in Vilnius, and obviously the daughter hasn't seen her father yet. How are you adapting, if you are? They were mentioned, and I think that sometimes, indeed, this psychological side of what is happening is huge. I remember when people were coming in September in 2020, they were like, that's for a month, for 3. So now we understand that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And I wonder how you feel like here in Lithuania and generally, if you think that there are issues that need to be addressed. Even if Lithuania is doing a lot, maybe we can be better. Maybe we can improve also. Yeah.
Но я хочу сказать, что литовское правительство делает очень много для адаптации белорусов здесь. Очень помогает с легализацией. Выдано, если я не ошибаюсь, около 20 тысяч гуманитарных виз. Теперь помогают с получением вида на жительство. То есть я хочу сказать, что вообще 2020 год показал, кто на самом деле белорусом является братским народом. Как в нашем инфополе официальном, пропагандистском принято много говорить про братский русский народ. Но, к сожалению, мы увидели, что власти России находятся на стороне диктатора Лукашенко, в то время как литовцы протянули белорусам руку помощи. И я знаю не один случай, когда белорусы пересекали литовскую границу нелегально, не имея при себе документов. И литовские пограничники входили в положение и пропускали белорусов с тем, чтобы легализоваться уже здесь, в Литве. То есть поддержка очень большая, и за это большая благодарность литовскому правительству.
Lithuania, I know that Lithuania has issued more than 20,000 national visas, and this support is really felt. In fact, what happened in 2020 and afterwards showed who is the real brotherly nation. There used to be the saying as if the neighboring Russia is, but in fact we have examples when Russia was giving up people to the Belarusian regime upon their requests, and then they were persecuted later. Meanwhile, Lithuania is doing just the opposite. It is protecting people who are fleeing from the repressions, and that shows this solidarity and the brotherhood. And in fact, it looks like it's Lithuania, not any other country, which should be called the brother of Belarus. So, and I know from the personal accounts, again, that it's not only about one institution. These are various institutions which are helping Belarusian people, trying to help them to adapt, legalize them in Lithuania, and this work is really, truly appreciated. So thank you for these kind words mentioning Lithuania. And again, I need to say that there are other countries which are doing that too. I think that Poland is helping also a lot. Ukrainians are helping. I know that Latvians are trying to. But because of the historical ties, because of the geographical proximity, I think this connection between Lithuanian and Belarusians is somewhat perhaps deeper. It has something an additional flavor, if you will. And I'm very happy to hear that. I don't know, 5 years ago, I said people-to-people contacts, and because of the tragedy which is happening in Belarus, we were without any programs. We were simply forced to cultivate these people-to-people contacts, and I think that this is a huge investment into the future. But coming back to the topic of the women and the women of freedom, has the perception of women in Belarus changed throughout the last year? Marina.
I think that the women's revolution has greatly accelerated the achievement of gender equality in Belarus. The women finally saw how strong they are and how strong their voice is. Our task is to prevent a rollback.
Yeah, it's something similar what the ambassador said, right? That it's not that I need to have a voice, but actually that I have a voice. And this, like, it's not that someone needs to give it to you. This perhaps as the confidence in yourself that basically because of the women trio, because of the women who went to the white protest, to the protest of the women in white, like calling for peaceful process, I think it reminded that women are not part, but is an essential part of the population, which needs to be part of that transformation and development of the country. Do you have the same feeling, Hana?
Well, I definitely do. I think Lukashenko made, I don't know if I mentioned that, but the biggest Lukashenko's mistakes that are going to be mentioned in all political textbooks, I think, around the world, are that firstly, Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya got registered as a presidential candidate. I think he really, кусать локти, how to say it, he really sort of was sort of understood that that was a really kind of huge mistake a few months later. And another mistake was obviously the one that I mentioned before, calling a woman not capable of leading the country. And these stereotypes have been changing, have been shattered by what happened last year and what's kind of keep happening in Belarus. I think now there are literally no doubts that women are an important part of the society and that a woman can lead the country and might be definitely a better president than Lukashenko is, because it's not really, honestly, hard to be a better president. And another issue I would say is this peaceful, what I've been thinking at the moment, right, this peaceful phase, right, this peaceful sort of transformation of the protest that Victoria and Marina mentioned. And this is something that we would need to sort of focus on during the transition period, right? One thing is to defeat the dictator. Another issue is to sort of make sure that this transition period is successful. And then if we focus on peacefulness, which is a pretty much peaceful protest, is a pretty much legal way of how you protest against an oppressive regime, right, outside the polling station. We don't have fair elections, so the only thing that we have is a protest right now, which we anyways don't have at the moment, but still. And if you kind of make sure that there is this peaceful transformation, then there is this a kind of deeper basis for democratization and democracy in the future. That's why I believe that Belarusians should continue peacefully protesting. Now it's not possible to go out to the streets, but it's really important not to sort of cross the line and keep this peacefulness, because that would mean that this country will be a sort of more democratic country in the future.
Yeah, well, how can you be a democratic country without women, right? So if the regime was neglecting and even mocking women, right, the women themselves became an inspiring story, and that's in itself, I think it's changing the society's perception. Victoria, like, in your opinion, I think that was a like personal transformation for you, like because of the birth of the daughter, like, but do you feel like, and you mentioned it yourself, that personally for you, there was quite a change in your life, but do you feel like the Belarusian society is changing their perception, its perception regarding women?
Я хочу отметить, что за этот год стало намного более солидаризированным женское движение, что сейчас этого, конечно, не видно. Мы больше не видим женских маршей в центре Минска, но все ушло в подполье и все ушло в онлайн. Женщины объединяются и помогают друг другу, поддерживая мужей политзаключенных, поддерживая друг друга. Женщины связываются друг с другом, не зная вообще, не будучи знакомыми, и дарят друг другу подарки, обмениваются Ну вот я могу сказать, что мне, например, на день рождения Эмилии абсолютно незнакомая женщина подарила книжку-развивашку для моей дочери. И это очень большой жест. И это то, чего я не видела до 2020 года. Вот такая солидарность, взаимоподдержка и ощущение единства, ощущение локтя.
Yes, what has been unique lately is the huge solidarity. And even if one could say that you cannot see the protests anymore, that this protest went underground. It's not visible, but it's there online. There's a lot of self-help initiatives, and this unity and solidarity and self-understanding of each other is unprecedented compared to what we used to be before. Marina.
And actually, yes, now the feminist community in Belarus is stronger than ever, actually, yes. And we communicate, we come up with some project and make some big plans together. We create project and will increase the number of women in politics, in board of the direction, in the STEM, in IT. We need help and expertise, but also have the world not to forget the Belarusian revolution has a woman's face, actually.
It does, it certainly does. We have only a few minutes left, so before we conclude, there's, I hope, an optimistic note in this. Where do you see yourself in 5-10 years from now? Hana.
Working for my country is good.
Victoria.
Я надеюсь, что через 10 лет мы с моим мужем продолжим заниматься общественной деятельностью и делать новые полезные проекты для Беларуси.
I hope that in 10 years from now, we will be doing like some civic work and something for the public good of Belarus together with my husband. Yeah. Marina.
I believe the new Belarus much closer than Europe, not to Russia actually. So, which means that change for the better can happen very quickly. I believe that Belarus will have a woman president. I know several excellent candidates, but I want to know even more.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. In fact, I think that Belarusian women spoke up, they showed their faces, and we want to see more. And that was a change that Belarusian society saw not only each other, not only the neighbors, but also the women's face in the society, and that's of crucial importance, and that's a huge transformation in itself. What the Lithuanian society and the international community is doing as well is a huge investment, I think, into this future of Belarus, also recognizing that there's women play an important and crucial role in this, and that's not a surprise that multiple leaders, President Macron, Chancellor Merkel, President Biden, among many others, MPs, prime ministers and ministers and presidents are meeting with Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya and with multiple inspiring women which are transforming and changing Belarus today. Thank you very much. All the best of luck. Congratulations with the International Human Rights Day, and hope that the next discussion is actually going to be happening in Belarus, in Minsk. Thank you very much.